Alright guys, welcome to part 3 of the LittleBigPlanet 2 Create Mode walkthrough. What we're going to show you here is the basic and advanced logic that you have available to you in the LittleBigPlanet 2 Create Mode beta. Now, first off we're going to start with the microchip. Now the microchip probably isn't what you think it is. The microchip isn't actually logic itself, it's just a place to put logic. The only thing you can put on these things is logic, and once you attach inputs and outputs to it, the wires will go in and out from the microchip itself. They won't sort of just fall off the middle of it. They'll always go straight to the edge that the direction they're facing or whatever, where you've stuck them from, and they'll exit in the same way. It's just a very neat way to manage logic, and if you don't have enough space to put logic on a certain item, this is a really good way to manage it. Even if you do have enough space, this is a really good way to manage logic, because you can make them visible and not visible like that. That just makes it really tidy. Now once you minimize it, the ones on the left are inputs and the ones on the right are outputs. The one on the bottom will activate the microchip. If you turn the microchip on or off, you can put an input, hook an input up to that space there and turn it on and off via any input method you like, with tags or switches or whatever, to activate the microchip. And if it's turned on, then the logic here will work. If it's not turned on, then the logic here will not work. And that includes logic that's put on microchips that are put on other microchips. You can also put microchips on microchips. As confusing as that sounds, you can put microchips on each other. But yes, that's essentially how microchips work. And you can give the microchips a name, any name you like. You can set show the circuit board. You can also do that with the R1 button with the pop-it. And you can also hide outgoing wires on the circuit board is closed. So if I do that, then outgoing wires are hidden. Not incoming wires, just outgoing wires. And you can also set whether the cables and the microchip itself is visible in play mode, as well as giving it a color. You can change it to whatever color you like. Now, the first type of logic we're going to cover is the AND gate. The AND gate is essentially a piece of logic that says all of these inputs must be activated for the output to be activated. At the moment we have 2 inputs hooked up to it. We can have, I believe, up to 100 or something. It's a really high number. You can have up to 100 inputs on it at once. At the moment we just have 2. You can invert the input if you want to, and you can have them visible in play mode or not, as well as changing the color of the switch itself. Now, here's how it works. I'm going to try and turn this on. You turn one of them on, nothing happens. You turn the other one on, nothing happens. But if you turn both of them on, the light will come on. That's the only way an AND switch will work. All of the inputs must be activated for that light to turn on. Now, over here we have an OR gate. This works in sort of an opposite manner. Only one of these inputs has to be activated for the light to work. They can both be activated. You can have up to 100 of these as well. Only one of them has to be activated for it to work. So as long as there's one on, doesn't matter how many of them you turn on, as long as one of them is on, the light will work. So I can turn one of them on, the light works. 2 of them, light's still working. If I just turn this one on, the light's still working. But if I turn them both off, the light goes off again. And you can set it to pretty much the same options as the AND gate. The XOR gate. This is similar to the OR gate, but it will only work, the output will only be activated if only one of these switches is on. If I turn this one on, the light will turn on. If I turn this one on, the light will turn off. If I turn this one on, the light stays off. If I only have one of them on again, the light turns on. If I have none of them on, the light turns off. One of them, the light turns on. 2 of them, the light turns off. You get the idea. Only one of the inputs can be activated for the output to be activated. And same options as the previous gates. Now over here we have a battery. Now a battery provides constant power to this light here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this to dimmer, just to show you how the battery works. Now the battery essentially just provides constant power to an output, or to a device that requires an input. And you can sort of set it to different power levels. So if an object is affected by analog input, for example speed, or in this case brightness, if you lower the power on the battery, that light will go dimmer and dimmer and dimmer until we get to 0 and it will turn off. And you can also bring it back up again, so you can have different amounts of power coming from the batteries, And once again, you can change the usual visible in play mode options and the color options. Over here, we have the toggle. Now the toggle will change its state whenever it's activated to yes or no. Like that. And when it's yes, it's activated. When it's no, it's not activated. And I've got it hooked up to this button. And essentially, it's a way to keep something in the state you want it in without having to hold it there. You can just press a button and it will stay there. So if I jump on this, it stays on. If I move off, it just stays on, and it'll stay on forever until I jump on it again, and it turns off. And you can do that as many times as you like. And you can set it to the default, whether it's on or off, or yes or no, when you start, as well as the usual options. Over here, we have a counter. Now, a counter, as its name would suggest, counts how many times you do something, and it requires a certain number of times for the input to be activated before the output will be activated. Here you set how many times you need to activate the input before the output will be activated. The current count is how many it's set to when you enter the level, so you can sort of set it to have a certain number already. This little thing down here will reset that to 0. If you hook up an input to that little thing down there, and you activate the input that's hooked up down there, it will reset this to 0, and it will go all the way back to the end. It'll reset the current count to 0. You can invert the input, yes or no. You can change the length, as you can with many of these bar type pieces of logic, and set the visibility and color options as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump on this button 5 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then the light turns on. Over here we have a timer. Now a timer works in a similar way, except it uses time instead of counting the amount of times an input is activated. It uses time in terms of seconds. Now the target time is how long the input has to be activated for before the output is activated. Current time is how much time it is set to when the level is started. You can set input action start, stop, forwards or backwards for analog inputs. You can make it go forwards or backwards in time. Input action start count up. So if I jump on this and start count up, it'll start going up. If I jump on it again, that just starts it going up instead of having to be held down. Start count down does the opposite, counts it down. Speed scale for more analog inputs. You can make the time go up faster or slower, but start stop is the basic one. If I jump on this and then jump off, it stops. Jump on it, it goes again. Jump off, it stops. And once you get to the end, the light will turn on. Over here, we have a really cool piece of logic. This is the randomizer. Now, the randomizer, as its name suggests, again, will do random patterns with its outputs. And I've got 3 lights here. And this switch is hooked up to activate the randomizer. Now, at the moment, it's just set to override pattern, which is essentially the randomizer's way of saying one shot. You jump on the button, it does one random pattern, and that's it. You can also set it to do, once it's activated, to do input or to change its output in various increments via seconds. You can have its minimum and maximum on time. So if it actually has, if you have a gap between the on time and off times, or the minimum and maximum on and off times, it will actually vary the time that it's on and off to make it even more random. But just for basic functionality, we'll set it to override pattern. Now you can have different patterns. You can have one at a time, so each time you jump on it, it changes the light. There's no pattern here at all, it's just completely random as to which one it's activating. So yeah, that's how that works. You can have it set to add, so each time you jump it adds a random one. You can have it set to add and reset when full, so when you've added all of them, it resets. And you can have it set to toggle, which actually toggles between these 3 modes, which makes it even more random. You can also have it set to invert the output, as well as the usual color and visibility options. Over here we have a direction splitter. Now a direction splitter will allow you to hook up one switch to do 2 different things, or control 2 different items. or pieces of logic. Now in this case I've got this one switch here to control these two motor bolts. Now if I pull it this way, it'll turn the one that's negative, or the one that's hooked up to the negative output, as you see there. If I pull the other one, pull it the other way, it'll activate the positive output. And you can change each setting for each individual item if you like, but the basic options for this are just the ones that you've seen with every other piece of logic so far. The opposite of this is the direction combiner. Now, the direction combiner allows you to hook two inputs up to one output. So in this case, I've got these two buttons hooked up to this motor bolt, and they will both make it go in different directions. If I jump on this one, it makes it go clockwise, or activates the positive input. If I jump on this one, it makes it go the other way, and activates the negative output. And its options are also the same as all the other ones. Over here we have the selector. Now the selector will, based on its inputs, choose one of the outputs to be activated. And it's essentially like lots and lots of toggles put together. You can choose the number of ports it has. You can set it up to about 100, probably like the other ones. And you can also set the default one. I think I've stuffed something up there. We'll just change that back to the way it was. And you can set it to have a default, or the current state, which is the default. If you don't want it to have a default, just set the one you've got set the current state, just set it blank. If you want to, you can invert the output in usual color options, but I'll show you how it works. It's quite hard to explain. Essentially, you can have whichever one of these inputs is activated, it will activate the output. But it will only activate one output at a time. And the output it chooses to activate will be the one that's furthest to the right, or in this case furthest down, furthest to this side of the selector itself. So you can have all three of these activated, but only this one on the right will be activated because the priority is set to this way. If you have these two activated, only this one will be activated because it's furthest to the right. And I'll show you how it works now. If I turn this one on, it turns that one on. But if I turn this one on, it turns the green one on. And you can set it to change if the input's off. And it, as you can see, it stays on whether or not the input is off. But let's say I activate this one, that will turn the red light on. But if I activate this one, the green light will come on. No matter how many times I activate this, the red one will never come on because the priority is given to the output that's furthest to the right. Over here we have the sequencer. Now this is a really good way to synchronize outputs activating at once. Now I've got it set up, hooked up to 3 batteries, hooked up to lights, and they will come up in a set pattern each time. Now there are the options for this. You can give the sequencer a name if you like. You can set the trigger radius if you've got it set to trigger via the Sackboy walking into its radius. At the moment it's hooked up to a switch. You can make it so that when it's activated it just starts playing forwards or it starts playing backwards. If you're hooked up to an analog input, you can set it to speed according to the input it's hooked up to. You can also set it to positional, which means you can, when you activate the input, you can change the position of the activation bar. At the moment we'll just have it set to start-stop. You can make it loop once it reaches the end, and you can have the seconds per stripe, and a stripe is just one of the colored bars. Is one stripe, and at the moment they're set for 3 seconds. As well as the usual options you've got there, I'll show you how it works. Once I turn it on, it goes red light, orange or yellow light, green light, none of them. And set to loops, and it'll go back. Red light, yellow light, green light, and none.